Prepare to embark on the adventure of a lifetime in the lush wilderness that's yours alone to explore.
Horse Tales is an adventure horse game from Esser Interactive, which was published by Microids. As you can see from the trailer, the promotion for this game was quite dramatic and proposed a game that would raise the bar for horse games and would be the best horse game in a lifetime. And as we can see by the subsequent bugs, issues and glitches, that is not exactly what happened, and sadly not the only problem with this launch. However, the developers will be quick to tell you that the only reason people are upset is because we, and I quote, expected something else. This is not the reason why we are upset, as we will come to see. For a long time after launch, Switch players couldn't play because the autosave feature wasn't working, and so kept losing hours of progress. It was supposed to be fixed, but never mind. They were also experiencing stuttering in-game and frame rate drops so bad that they couldn't play, and they couldn't get the Irish cob because it's still not available in the shop. But it doesn't end there. Currently people are experiencing hard crashes when they launch the game, and there was a big issue with physical copies which took weeks to ship, with Amazon pointing the finger at Microids and vice versa. I do hope they reach their players in due course. And in between all of this, new bugs, issues, glitches and problems are being discovered every day. The amount of problems this game has seen since launch would make Cyberpunk blush. But the players defend this game, saying that this is normal. All games are buggy at launch, which is emphatically not true. It is not normal for games to be launched in completely broken states. That usually speaks to problems behind the scenes, as shown by Anthem, Mass Effect, Andromeda and the aforementioned Cyberpunk. Broken games speak to a troubled development, as I said. Horse Tales launched in a broken state, and some are even calling it basically early access, which isn't far off. But the developers in turn now say that the game will get better once all these bugs are handled, sorted and fixed. They just need to fix the bugs and the game will be perfect. And that is also simply not the case, because even without the bugs, the game is empty, barren and the content is lackluster. Most of the features feel half finished and half realized, poorly thought out concepts, half-baked ideas slapped onto a superficially pretty world with a little more to offer than some eye candy, as if the developers didn't care or didn't have the resources, which is not a great excuse, seeing as they received 620,000 euros for funding and had 3 years to develop. It's a decent budget for any game, and that time frame is also pretty well within industry standards for a small horse game. Furthermore, the Nintendo Switch, which was their main platform, has seen the most problems. And despite what hopeful players might be thinking, no new content is going to be added into this game. What we see is what we're getting, and the most the developers can do is clean it up, and to be fair, they do seem to be trying to do that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll get into what happened a little later. Now, Horse Tales is not a complete and utter failure. Beneath the veneer of mediocrity are brief glimpses of something good, and we aim to go and find them. We're going to look at everything in this game, from story to horses to world to gameplay to breeding, and look at each feature to determine where they went right and where they veered horribly off course and down the canyon and into the tree. But as always, if you like this game, I'm not here to tell you not to. I just like analyzing games and asking myself why they do or don't work. Also, a huge thank you to the people over at Horse Tales community for helping me with this video. You guys are awesome. And then to my coffee supporters for supporting this channel. And finally to Explodo for being an awesome supporter and buying me more coffees than I rightfully could handle this month. With that out of the way, guys, let's get into it. A story is very important for a game. It can teach you how to play, expand the world you're playing in, get emotionally invested, and can be the sole driving factor to encourage you to finish the game. Unfortunately, in Horse Tales, although the story is essential for progress, like unlocking areas and features, that's really all it is there for. The story goes as follows. You go to visit your aunt on Emerald Valley. Once there, you learn from Gabriel, the mayor's son, that the estate is in disarray, and that it's been like that for a while. Your aunt has been on vacation for so long that this happened. What are you doing on that cruise? And you are now left in charge of fixing the estate over the course of a summer vacation. It is at this point you realize you are probably only 16 years old, have no money or currency, have no place to sleep, don't know anyone on this abandoned island, they could be cannibals for all you know, and so you hastily say goodbye, head back to the docks and rush off back home grateful for your narrow escape. And that's the story. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let's head to the horses. Okay, fine, no. You decide to rebuild the estate, of course. The only way to rebuild the ranch is to be famous. The game never explains why this is so, but fame is a key factor in rebuilding the ranch. You do this mostly by racing, selling famous horses, or picking it up off the ground like someone's trash. Second-hand fame, I suppose. It's icky and it smells like the 80s. Racing, you hear about a girl called Lily, and you are expected to beat her at the Sneaky Way race. You make your way over, start the race, and then it feels like you're playing Dark Souls. Just for interest's sake, I tried this race 8 times before I got it. What great game design. You beat the record of a prestigious rider, Lily, who calls you a nerd and leaves. Thanks. Gabriel asks you to help you find his sister. You do so. Lily's brother asks you to go and look for her. You do so. Lily asks you to help find her horse. You do so. She tells you her parents want to sell her horse. You tell her she shouldn't. She says okay. And the next day you're best friends. Can someone tick the Forge friendship box? Thanks. You go to meet Lily at her estate, and then you get trapped in a maze. And at this point, you realized that Lily never wanted to be your friend. She just wanted to lure you into her poorly designed labyrinth so that the Minotaur could have its sacrifice. That doesn't happen. What does happen is you run around the maze swearing like a marine because the damned thing has no minimap and you don't know where you are and you keep ending up on the wrong end and I don't want to go back in there and you can't make me and where's the fucking flamethrower? Or you just jump on top of it. You finally find her in the gardens. She's riding a different horse, but she seems happy about it, so yay. She tells you about making ingots. You go and make some ingots for constructing in a town that's so far away you probably never want to go back there. You will have to go back there. Your aunt tells you to throw a party to celebrate. You do. No one pitches. Hello, darkness, my old friend. You go and ask everyone, but everyone had been busy, and Lily locked you out of the estate. Matthias takes you to a new area where you can catch the Emerald Valley Devil. You catch the Emerald Valley Devil. You will never need another horse.
Is the lord of all horses.
The next day, a stranger comes to your home. He tells you to follow him. You follow him and find out that Lily has thrown you a big party. After the party, I finish the side quests and 10 hours in, I finally figure out how to change my tag, my clothing, and how to build a breeding stable. And that's the story. Let's first cover a couple of positive points before we get into the negative. Firstly, I like the fact that you can pick your horse at the start of the game. This is a feature that gives you an instant connection with your horse and is a really nice touch. I wish more games would do this, as creating a horse is pretty cool, but there's something very special about picking a horse that is pre-designed. And, well, that's really it. That's really all that I have to say positive about the story. Let's get into the rest. The story is extremely cliche and does little to do anything unique or interesting with horses that we haven't seen already. You build a ranch, you capture a wild horse, beat your rival, it's been done to death. To top it off, the characters are shallow and dull, the lore and world is barely explored, and there is no tension line running through the story to keep us engaged. An overarching plot, essentially. It's just a bunch of events cobbled together, much like the game itself. Comparing this game's story to games like Peppa Funnel, we can instantly see a stark difference in the amount of energy and effort spent in writing these stories, aka there wasn't a lot of effort spent in Horse Tales' story. Pippa Funnel horse games had brilliant stories, some of them very good. Now, they did often fall into those same cliches of rebuilding ranches and saving horses, but the thing is, a cliche can still be well done. It doesn't have to be bad if you're willing to put some thought into it. Another point I'd like to mention are the dialogue boxes. Although it's a decent idea, it doesn't really add anything to the story. It's just used to get more information, but it doesn't expand further than the current event taking place. It could have easily added more lore, it could have easily added more context. I really wish they'd done more with this, even if it was just a tell me more about this town or tell me more about you type of stuff. Anything that will give us information or lore about the world we are playing in. It really is just a waste of an idea, and really just keep hitting yellow. You're not going to miss anything if you keep hitting yellow. This part of the game feels wholly neglected. It feels like a first draft of a story, then tacked on and rushed out. It's like they wanted to tick that adventure box that they had on their Steam page, but didn't really put in the effort to make it do it properly. Now, there is apparently a reason for why the story is so terrible. According to the developers, the story was supposed to be a side event, and we're supposed to be focusing on the sandbox adventure. This is all well and good, Skyrim does this, but the problem is, if we don't complete the quests, we can't progress, because these areas and features are hidden behind the stories and quests. Like this player trying to learn the genetics of their horse, and she can't because she has to progress through the story first. So, despite what the developers say, they made the story the most important part of their game by design, as you can't progress without it. But now, let's take a closer look at some of those quests. Quests are made up of two different types, main and side quests. The main quest focuses on the story and unlocks areas. The side quests are extras that serve as tutorials for very specific features like breeding. Apart from the main quests, most quests are picked up from the mailbox. If you don't complete the main quest, you can't explore. If you don't complete the side quests, you might miss key information that you need to know, like how to learn your horse's genetics. Tell me again how unimportant the story is. The quests are very run-of-the-mill and dull. Just basic fetch quests, or go and find this, or go and do that. It's nothing really to write home about, and none of these quests stood out beyond the basic run from point A to point B style gameplay we've seen in horse games a million times. SSO is a great example of this. Most of their quests are running from point A to point B. But the good thing about SSO's quests are that they actually take the time to tell good stories. They serve a purpose beyond just learn how to do X. As an example of the type of quest you get in this game, you have one where you need to bring a medicinal herb to the vet to learn about horse genetics, a herb which grows everywhere. Another example is the Help Gabriel Find His Sister quest, in which the entire quest is literally right behind Gabriel until you find his sister. All other quests are pretty much like this, just mindless follow me or go talk to that guy style quests with little to no story or intrigue. But the main point in Horse Tales quests seems to be teaching basic features and, of course, backtracking. So many of these quests are just backtracking. The first quest you have to do is literally run back to the spot you just were to get some gas. I hate you. Backtracking is of course only there to extend player game time. This game is empty, the story is dull, and there really isn't a good reason to keep playing, so they had to extend those hours somehow. And they did that with endless backtracking, because designing a game is difficult and backtracking is an easy element to add to artificially extend player game time. And just to rub salt in the wound, the developer decided to not tell you about the reset to estate button. I had to find out about this on the Discord, just another way to make sure that you play that little bit longer to ensure you got your money's worth. Brilliant. So the quests in Horse Tales neither raise nor lower the bar. It slots in under the bar, nothing we haven't seen before, and even more annoying than usual because none of them bother to tell you interesting stories. Now the other problem with these quests is not that they lock information. Many games do this and it's absolutely a standard, but that the game does not actively guide you to these features, and so you might miss key information. The tutorial and guidance, in short, is terrible. You only have one marker you can use at a time, and this marker is usually active on the main quest. Even if you have other quests in your journal, if you do not focus on them, none of them will show up on the map, meaning you are most likely missing people you should be talking to. And then later, when you want to do these quests, you end up backtracking the whole time because making players backtrack is fun. Shoot me. Ow! But the problem with the guidance specifically is because you can only have one quest active at a time and the game doesn't actively guide you to important side quests, you might miss key information that hurts your game so much that it can break it. Let me explain with petting. Petting alleviates the horse's stress in the game. When a horse becomes stressed, it won't gallop, a big no-no if you want to race, because it means that you can't jump over long jumps. Now, there is a side quest with Kiki where she will tell you specifically about petting, encourage you to do so, and then you're on your way. Now, even if you never speak to Kiki, you can still attempt to pet the horse with all the information given at that precise moment you do so. But let's say you never petted the horse and you never spoke to Kiki, because there's no marker above her head to tell you she's important. This means that you could potentially miss out on the petting tutorial. And what was the one thing a lot of people complained about when the game launched? My horse is always stressed. Now, this was also due to a very annoying bug, but it could be that a lot of people simply didn't know that petting the horse would alleviate the stress. This is extremely important information that you have to actively seek out in the world instead of it being brought to you. Now, you do have these little pop-ups on the side that do encourage you to pet the horse, but this should rather have been something that they put front and center to ensure people knew about it from the get-go. Before you even climb on your horse, you should be petting it, simply because it's such an important part of the game. Because they didn't do that, I think a lot of people were confused, and this caused a lot of frustration that could have easily have been avoided if they just coded the tutorial properly. Another problem I had was trying to figure out how to change my clothes. The only way to do that is to build a small house. The only way to do that is to get the blueprint from the mayor. The only way to do that is to read your mail. And the only way to actually build the house is to get planks from Matthias, which the game mentions once and does not keep track of after this piece of dialogue. As a result, I played around 90% of my time with the exact same clothes on. These types of issues essentially hide key features from players, but I don't think they did it deliberately, it's just due to terrible game design. But the problems don't end there. The tutorial is an absolute mess in this game. When a game fails at a tutorial, you know you're in for a ride. The idea with any tutorial is to teach you very quickly how you play the game so that you can get, well, on with playing the game. In Horse Tales, all the side quests and main quests are part of the tutorial, so you have to finish the entire story to finish the tutorial. Meaning, it can take you anything from 4 to 10 hours to finish the tutorial before the game, I quote, begins proper. Good job, guys. This is so well thought out. I never thought to make my entire story a tutorial.
You sense the sarcasm there, because I meant it.
But there is another problem. The tutorial is reactionary, meaning when you interact with something that warrants an explanation, the explanation will pop up and you can learn that feature. But this doesn't always work well, as I received a tutorial on drifting after I'd gathered enough fame to take part in the Sneaky Way race. This is the third race you can take part in. I don't learn about drifting on the first race, I learned on the third. I felt robbed because I like drifting. Whee! I also only learned about whistling for a horse the first time I reset to the estate. I have no idea why, but because the game never tells you about the reset to estate button, I will find it hilarious if there are people who don't know about whistling for your horse. And the fame tutorial only pops up after you've spoken to a character about something that has nothing to do with fame. Even though I've already picked up fame by this point. Like I said, it's very strange. The reactions don't always function the way they should. So the tutorial itself is extremely poorly done, the guidance is extremely badly done, and as a result, this creates problems in the game itself. It comes across like they didn't put any thought into it. Much like with the story, it's rushed and tacked on. It's just sort of shoved in there at random intervals because a game needs a tutorial. But the tutorial then repeats itself, and when it explains the breeding, it doesn't even explain it properly. Nowhere is the tutorial more screwed up than with breeding, but we'll get to that. Like I said, rushed and again tacked on. And this is going to be a common theme as we move forward. People have called this game early access, and this is the reason why. It feels rushed and unfinished. Horse fails, unfinished Valley Ranch. But the problems with the guidance does not end with the tutorial and the hidden information. No, it extends to the map, which was the most frustrating point in this game that I found. Maps are there to entice and aid you in your travels. For one, it can intrigue by having most of it covered in a fog or shadow, and as you progress, you slowly open up more and more, enticing you to play further. At the same time, a map is there to help you traverse tricky areas. Mostly, if they want to have the fog of the map, games combine it with a minimap to ensure the player can traverse even if they are in an unknown or strange area. The map in Horse Tales is covered in such a fog, and it is clearly there to encourage you to explore, and it does so. Unfortunately, both the world and map is shit. The world quickly starts to feel claustrophobic due to the tunnel and maze effect of the so-called open world. The corridors are downright evil in their design. When you see a marker, you want to instinctively take the shortest route you can figure out, so you run directly towards it. Problem is, you often have to run in the opposite direction to get actually to the marker. This creates more backtracking and confusion than this game has a right to have. I was stuck here long enough to quit the game. The game also has no minimap.
Why is it so mean?
But the problem doesn't stop there. Many times, even when you are in a discovered area, the fog doesn't lift and you're left running around like an idiot trying to find your way out. The worst part was hands down the maze. My map never opened and I could never for the life of me figure out how to get out of the maze, and a maze that isn't even properly closed up, mind you. This is why people think this is early access, possibly alpha. Look at this! They didn't even close up the maze. But even if the map is open, you have another problem. The marker isn't aligned. I am on a road. Here I am riding. I'm riding on road. Yes, pretty road. But when I go into map, I am not on road. Explain. Explain. Explain! Explain, Horsetails, explain! I don't know where I am, I don't know where to go, and when there are multiple roads, I'm completely lost because I don't know on which road I am, because the corridors make it impossible to navigate, and with no minimap, this becomes a damned problem. Please fix your map. Fun fact about the map, when Kiki tells you that she's going to mark your map to show you where rare horses are, that never happens. Kiki is a liar. So in short, the map is broken, and although the world is big, we'll cover that later, the functionality and corridors make it difficult to use the map to navigate, but despite the issues with the map, there is some joy to be had in the world, although not much. The world has a lot of biomes that you can explore, keeping the areas interesting to ride around in. On the surface level, the world is beautiful. I don't always like pastel colors, but this color palette works in this context and it evokes that feeling of zen. Many people have compared the visual aesthetic to games like Zelda Breath of the Wild, although clearly not as detailed. This particular style is known as cel shading and has been seen in games like Okami and of course Genshin Impact. It gives the game a painted, water-washed, almost cartoon effect, and yes, it is absolutely gorgeous. Now, some have complained, though, that the white in the game literally blinds you, so the color balance can be a bit out of whack sometimes, it seems. Sound effects and music are serviceable. The music is a little cliché, with nothing that really stands out against the weight of the visual. In short, it neither enhances nor takes away. It is simply there, but will cut out at random times. Whenever I open the map, the music will just quickly fade away, like an apologetic street urchin that feels terrible for making its presence known. Surprisingly though, when the music did cut out, I did enjoy the silences. It tended to build on the zen-like quality, and when the game went quiet, it made me appreciate the world. I honestly don't know if that was the intention of the game, but that's what I got from it. On the surface level, the graphics are very beautiful, atmospheric, and extremely diverse. But don't put too much scrutiny on the world. When you start to look too closely, you begin to see how unfinished the world is. We have pixelated textures, rocks not properly set, grass pushing through stone, and grass turning grey on the stone. We have rivers that cut into the environment, trees that aren't well blended, those open hedges, textures popping in and out, trees that don't render, more textures popping in and out, a giant wheelbarrow, bridges that don't touch the ground, ropes that don't hang down, and so on, and so forth, and so on, and so forth. And then we have the bugs, which we have mentioned before, like walking through walls, walking under the water, invisible walls, falling through the world, items that respawn that don't actually give you anything, and so on and so forth. The visual bugs coupled with the unfinished world just hurts the general aesthetic that they were going for. Although the world is pretty, it just feels unfinished, as if they never got around to doing the final touches to polish it. So despite being pretty, and it certainly is pretty on a surface level, it very quickly becomes ugly under even the most basic of scrutiny. And then we have the assets. Oh dear, oh dear. No one wants me to talk about the assets because it doesn't matter. Unfortunately, it does, because they decided to put a $30 to $50 price tag on the game. As such, the assets do very much matter, especially since they used free assets for this industry standard priced game. The first day that I played this game, I came across the mayor's office in town. I went inside, and this is what happened. What's in here? It is that... Oh my... Oh, wait, no, wait, let me just go outside again. Wait, am I seeing this right? What you're seeing are assets that don't fit into the world. This, look at that, that's actually pixelated because it's actually an asset that doesn't really fit into the world. Oh, that you can kind of see that. It looks... It's literally been bought and placed there from an asset store. Now after this, I immediately went to the asset store and started looking for this particular couch, and sure enough, I found it. a free couch to be precise. Not only that, but a free furniture pack which is used everywhere. Now, I want to make something very clear here. Using assets is perfectly fine. A lot of small game studios use assets, but it comes down to how well those assets blend in, how many you use, and by extension, how much you're asking for the game. Esser fails at all levels. They are an established gaming company. They have brought out a lot of games, and they asked $30 to $50 for this game. Taking another example like The Spirit of the Mouse, we see a small game that is also quite pricey, but it is the company's first game, and yeah, they do use assets, but the game isn't as buggy as Horsetails, and the assets blend in pretty well. And that's the thing. Many of the assets in Horsetails clash like the purple drapes against my green upholstery. Others have been copy-pasted everywhere, making it feel like they were dropped there haphazardly just to fill up the world. Like this tree. This tree is everywhere. Someone write a fanfiction about this tree. This unfortunately makes the game feel cheap, and the $30 to $50 price tag really doesn't help matters. We also have shades that don't fit in well, the whole lighthouse is an asset, the entire town is an asset, including many decorations from the estate. The animals are assets, and it's possible the rocks are as well. Some of the tack also seems to be an asset, the scarecrow, the well, and you get the idea. There are a lot of assets. It's difficult to unsee once you start seeing it. Perhaps the reason they used assets was simply because they found themselves too rushed to complete the game. The other possibility is they simply cannot make good assets, but then we have to lump the horses in with that, and the horses are quite well done, so I'm leaning more towards rushed. But then we also have to consider the 3 years they had to make it, and these ugly hedges and trees. So honestly, I could go either way. Now, there was some drama around the assets. In brief, I did some research and discovered that a lot of assets were bought in the Unity and Unreal store. Now, to be fair, both assets are usually available on both stores. I just found one on the Unity and clocked it as a Unity asset. A bug mega thread on the Steam page was made by a fan who has logged around 100 plus hours into this game. The thread was essentially a spot where players could share known bugs and add what they wanted to see in the quality of life update. The creator of this thread learned about these assets through myself and added this fact at the top of the thread, stating that the assets were bought from a Unity store, animations were also bought, and this would make it difficult for the developers to add those quality of life features. A developer told them to remove that top part of it as it was spreading misinformation, seeing as they bought the assets, and I quote, from Unreal store and not the Unity store. Splitting hairs, I suppose. They also bought assets from CG Trader and a couple of other places, so they got them really from all over. The fan made the changes the developer requested, but still kept the message at the top of the page and made his stance clear on the subject. I don't think the argument being made here is that free and purchased assets are a bad thing. They're there for a reason, and as you said, plenty of games use them. It's more nuanced than that. The issue is the sheer amount of assets versus the amount of in-house items and the fact that some assets do not even fit in with others. We paid a high price for an empty, broken game filled primarily with bought assets. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter where the assets have come from, as a lot of Unity and Unreal models are interchangeable, available for both engines, and those specific file types are compatible for several other game engines as well. The response from the developer went as follows. You're of course under no obligation to maintain this thread whatsoever. Thank you. In this case, and since you have it backed up, I will delete the thread in order to avoid further confusion and misinformation regarding asset pack usage. Feel free to repost the accurate information at any point. A few minutes later, the thread was deleted after the developer posted this message. As you can see by these two comparisons, the poster did actually change out the information as requested, but the thread was still deleted. Now, this kind of inspired a very heated debate or a heated back and forth on the Main Quest Discord server. And yeah, it got a little interesting where people sort of encouraged others to mass report this person for making this bug thread and for adding that at the top. This was very quickly stopped by the moderators, but yeah, the thought was kind of still there. In case you're wondering, the players did not take too well to this. On the guidelines from Steam regarding managing your community thread, there is this section which states, do not use the delete feature to hide negative opinions or criticisms of the game. Doing so will quickly turn your forum into a place to discuss moderator actions instead of the game itself. Players have a right to express their discontent with the game or its features. Which is exactly what happened. The community made a second post discussing how poorly this was handled, and I have to agree. It comes down to taking things on the nose. You used assets. It's fine. Let players discuss it and have at it. Whether it was from Unity or Unreal does not matter. What matters is that there are a lot of assets in this game, and the price tag and the state of the game makes people suspicious. Letting us talk about it and sharing in those discussions would go a long way in alleviating a lot of the mistrust that's already brewing thanks to slow responses, slow updates, and little to no feedback from the developers. But the problem with the world doesn't stop at assets and bad textures and bugs. The world is also damned empty. The world of Horsetails is emptier than my liquor cabinet 1 hour after finishing this game. It feels, as many have noted, like a ghost town or a ghost island. You will find few and far between characters, very little wildlife or life at all. It feels like you're pretty alone on a big island with apparently numerous towns. Horsefails, Ghost Valley Ranch, everyone has died, send help. In Horse Riding Club Adventures 2, we have a ton of characters and people we can talk to. It's not in-depth or anything, but we can have a chat with these people and learn more about them, and give them funny accents, or terrible accents. But in Horsetails, the emptiness is almost jarring. It feels like an apocalypse wiped out the colony and they're barely holding on. It's also confusing, especially since we have 2 towns, and they're as empty as the aforementioned liquor cabinet. But this only begs the question, why? The answer is they most likely ran out of time. As we have stated before, the game feels unfinished, and this is most apparent through the bugs and this great vast emptiness of nothing. And this has been a point of discussions since the launch of the game. The game just feels like the developers launched an early access game. A good example of where we see this clearly are the clones. Oh, the clones. The clones are everywhere. There are more clones in this game than in the entire Star Trek The Next Generation series, and for those of you who know that series, you will appreciate this statement. These clones are created because the developers either didn't have the time or the skill to code a single character which carried all the coding and information needed for the player and would move around during the story. Each time you start a new quest, a copy of an NPC will pop up into creation holding the information that you need to continue with the quest. So, for example, Gabriel has 2 quests, taming wild horses and 1 for the main quest. If you have both of these quests in your journal, Gabriel will manifest twice because each quest creates a new Gabriel. I literally had an instance where the game told me to speak to Gabriel. I had Gabriel right in front of me, but I had to run all the way around up to the top of the cliff in order to speak with him, because this was the wrong Gabriel. It's essentially a lazy way to add quests without actually putting the thought or development into how those quests would proceed logically in the world. Easiest way to do that, make a new character for each quest line so that we don't have to think about where the character is at any point in time. Easier to code, but it takes away the immersion of the game has. At the very least, the extra clones do increase the population somewhat though. Laziness paying off in real time. Also, unfortunately, there is no day and night cycle, which is a bit of a shame and makes the world feel a little surreal as a result. It's not terrible, it's just odd to have this huge open world and brag about it, and then it doesn't have any sort of, basic day and night cycle. Feels like I'm in a fever dream, possibly a nightmare. Now, riding around the world is relaxing in some ways, but frustrating in others. We've briefly touched on the corridor problem earlier, so let's just dive a little deeper into it here. Open world places a very specific idea in people's heads, specifically not a world that feels like a bunch of rooms connected by hallways. This is not an open world, it's a corridor world. Due to this corridor world, the place feels claustrophobic and shut off. It feels like you can never quite breathe, and navigation becomes almost impossible due to the map, minimap, and the aforementioned corridors. A game like Horse Riding Club Adventures does not have many biomes, no, but it does have a true open world. I can ride exactly where I want to, and it doesn't stop me at all. No corridors are preventing me from cutting across fields or searching out new areas. It is simply vast, open, and perfect for exploration. But the corridors in Horsetails gets even worse due to obstacles, which makes exploration even more frustrating. Jumping and ducking and invisible walls mean that exploration becomes tedious. The best example would be the Greenwood Forest, where I got stuck because I couldn't get over this jump. I had to do it 7 times just due to this terrible angle. Thank you. Are you kidding me? No, I had it. And this stupid camera, it makes it impossible to get over this jump. Did I get... No, I didn't get it. I think I'm actually stuck here. Maybe I can reset to the estate. I think I did see that you... Thank you. Oh dear God, thank you. Man, that was really annoying. It's just a mess of jumps and obstacles and walls, which is most likely supposed to keep exploration interesting, but because the horses are constantly getting stressed, freaked out, or hungry, the trip becomes more of a chore than a journey, and people will actively avoid these areas. How many of us have actually gone back to the High Garden? And then we have a lot of gates that prevent you from progressing, making the world feel even more claustrophobic. Like this wall. This is the funniest wall in the entire game. It appears literally only to prevent you from heading off into the sunset. It's a roadblock, but it's so blatant I can't call it that. Roadblocks are at least usually a bit more subtle. This is just a wall that stops you from going forward. I can't get over how lazy these designers were. I honestly can't. Now, the big point where the world of Horse Tales does stand out from other horses is the scope. It is very big, and that does at least add something to the enjoyment of exploration, although unfortunately not much, as we'll come to see. Only 10.4% of people have actually explored the entire map. That should give you a good indication of how popular exploration is. It isn't. Oh, you wanted me to say it in a nicer way? Well, I'm all out of softening the blow pills today. Sorry. You'll be exploring for 5 main reasons. Finding blueprints for construction, finding fame, finding tack and clothes, finding resources, and looking for one single rare horse. Resources and fame are scattered on the ground and they respawn every day. And the rare horse is something fun to go and look for and really the highlight of exploration. Because the resources are lying scattered across the world, there really is no challenge in finding them. Fame, for example, is often placed in interesting areas, but because the fame keeps respawning, you won't be tempted to try and get it, because tomorrow, all the fame you just picked up will have respawned. In short, there is no value to it, and although there are things to find, due to the ease with how you find them, it does not entice you really to do so. Blueprints, tack and clothes are usually found in chests, and some are found after completing quests. Although it's fine to have a lot of stuff to look for, a shop would have worked a lot better for these items for various reasons. For example, we can plan what we want to build if we can see what we can buy. We can also see the clothes that are available, which will motivate you to get more money or fame to buy it, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of reasons why you would want to shop. Also to give you an excuse to actually go back to certain places, like for example, they have a blacksmith in one of the towns. It's a long trek, but if there was, for example, a shop that unlocked a couple of nice stuff, it would have given us more motivation to go up to that place specifically to go and buy interesting things. Now, there is a possibility that they planned for one, but the problem was quickly realized when they had nothing to put in the world. So they scattered the blueprints and clothing to make exploration a bit more rewarding than just go and find some resource. So literally they tore up the shop in order to give you something to find in the world. As for the ghost horse, it's one of the only fun things to go and look for and one of the only points I won't spoil in the game. I will say that I wish they'd added more elements like this, more interesting items and treasures to find, perhaps even a couple of more horses. A collectible would have done wonders for this game. Even 3 of these horses would have been cool. Anything to entice us to explore a bit more. For example, there are these little pandas lying around, and I wonder if this used to be part of a collectible feature, but it got snuffed out during development. More's a pity, as it would have done wonders for encouraging exploration. One other reason to explore is looking for wild horses to tame. I like the fact that you can tame horses. Also, the fact that these horses keep respawning and changing keeps the world a little dynamic and encourages you to explore and check out what new horses are available. It's just a pity the best horses are so damned far away, and it can, once again, due to all the obstacles, due to the corridors, due to all of these other issues, the exploration becomes tedious, and so not a lot of people, especially myself, just don't bother going to look for them. So in closing, the exploration is unrewarding. What you're picking up could have readily been available in a shop, and the fame could have easily been called prestige and placed on hard-to-reach places, making them meaningful. I can easily sit here and rattle off a ton of other better ideas they could have implemented, but really all it comes down to is they simply didn't think it through. The world in exploration feels much like the tutorial, poorly thought out. Once again, like an early access game. There's something there, but it's not coming to fruition. It feels a little too off to be polished. I'm not sure what they were thinking with this world, but really the fame and obstacles and resources scattered just makes everything feel rushed and unfinished. Like they still have to think about how you're supposed to be collecting these things. But to be fair, there is some enjoyment to be had just riding through these areas. Just don't turn the camera. Oh, I always like it. Whoa! Oof! Whoa, that oh no, I don't like this camera. Oh, I don't like. What is wrong with this? Wait, no. Why do horse games companies mess with cameras? We've been doing this for years, and with hundreds of thousands of games, no problem. Suddenly, horse games want to corner the market of gameplay nausea. Do you people have a contract with Dramamine? to be fair, I get it. It's supposed to be very cinematic, giving you big, sweeping shots of this pretty world. That's all well and good, but the end result is nauseating. It looks like they were trying to copy one of the most iconic games of our time, Shadow of the Colossus. But the creators of Horsetails seem to be hearing the bell, but they got no idea where the church is at, because they did not take their time to understand why the camera in Shadow of the Colossus worked so well. Shadow of the Colossus has a camera that twirls around the player but often slides off to the side to give you an open look of the world. It will also, when you are in wide spaces, zoom out to give you that feeling of vast openness Team Eco wanted to showcase. It is one of the many reasons why Shadow of the Colossus has such a distinct emotion. The camera design alone will drive home that sense of vastness and isolation to the player because it deliberately makes a point to draw your attention to it. But despite being so artistic, you will notice it is pinned, as in it has a turning point on which the camera is figuratively mounted. As a result, no matter where you turn the camera, it will always turn circular around the character, ensuring no vertigo and ease of control. So despite being unique and artistic, it's still functional and serves a purpose. The camera in Horsetails is clearly also designed to be artistic, attempting to give these wide, sweeping shots of the world to help us admire it in all its glory. But the problem is the camera is mounted, so to speak, on the player's screen, not the player's character. So we get this strange feeling of moving our own heads, not the character's viewpoint, and that's what's causing the weirdness. Furthermore, due to the tight corridors of the world, you can rarely turn your camera sideways, as something like a tree, a fence, a rock, or anything else will knock the camera back every time, causing even more nausea. And the horse is crammed into the corner of the screen, making it even more difficult to get those dramatic shots, and it cuts off the legs. Because I guess the idea is also to get dramatic shots of the horse, yes? If you decide to lock the camera, it becomes even worse, because then we get it into the situation like Wild Shade, where it follows the character so sharply it makes you feel sick. How do you screw up a camera this badly? It's like screwing up space to jump. Just stop messing with cameras, please. Just leave well enough alone. But now we're going to get into something a little bit more positive. The horses. The basic horse model is damned well done. I'm going to be explaining exactly why that is, because I want people to admire this animation on a technical level as well. If you want to skip the technical, animatical mumbo jumbo, head on over to this timestamp. Something I've been meaning to talk about in my videos is general horse anatomy and animations, and some mistakes people make when animating them. There are a few things one needs to keep in mind. The main thing is that the front legs are the support and the back legs are the propulsion. As such, the front leg can never bend while carrying weight, otherwise the horse will collapse. Watching a horse at canter, we can see that the leading leg is the absolute support of the horse for a good portion of the canter, which is why changing the lead during racing, for example, is so important. This leg can get tired. As the rest of the body is being thrown forward, this front leg remains ramrod straight, carrying the entire weight of the horse until it can bring the other three legs forward to continue the next cycle. As we can see here, this was definitely keep in mind, as those front legs remain ramrod straight when carrying weight, unlike Red Dead Redemption. Look at those knees! Something else to keep in mind is where the point of balance is on a horse. The balance will shift all the time while in motion. When it's walking, it tilts slightly forward. When it's trotting, it will tilt slightly back, which is why some horses raise their head in a trot. And during a gallop, the balance's point is bouncing between the shoulders and the hindquarters as the motion bobs the balance forwards and backwards. Mostly this is due to momentum, but without the balance point, the horse will fall on its face. Duh. Horsetails considered this balance point, at least somewhat. The walk cycle is smooth and calm, the trot has a lovely rhythm, and the gallop is energetic and keeps decent balance while going through those forward and backward cycles. What makes it even better is they actually change leg leads depending on where you are turning, although you can get some funny effects if you do it too much. But other games like SSO and Equestrian the Game have already made brilliant strides in making horses move and ride realistically. ETG actually has extensions, collections, the flying changes, which Rain Ravine can also do, passages and piafs. I have a lot of problems with Equestrian the Game, but one thing I will never take away from that game are its animations and its attention to detail. So this anatomy is really nothing new. But the praise for Horsetails does not stop with the animations. We have good sound effects and quite a vocal horse that makes it feel alive. When you pet the horse, it actually reacts with this burst of animation that I absolutely adore. The horses also come in a wide range of colors, from bay to pinto, and my only real gripe with this is that they don't bring out enough solid colors in the wild horses. I like bays and browns and blacks and white. Yes, I call them white because if I put a paint card next to the horse that says white, I can't see a damn difference. But now we have to talk about the Irish cob, the ugly brother of the Selle Francais. Where the warm blood was clearly designed and molded and put a lot of thought into, the Irish cob falls into the same pitfalls as the environment. It's rushed and unfinished. The feathering looks like spikes, and I constantly want to use them as offensive weapons. Die, die. They also don't cover the horse's feet well, and it just looks, once again, rushed, unpolished, and ugly. Their hair gets unstuck at times, and the bit actually rests in the teeth instead of higher up in that interdental space between molars and incisors. The other issue is with the animations, and oh boy, does it look bad. Let's compare briefly the front legs of the Selle Francais and trot, and then the trot of the Irish cobs, because I need to show what the problem is. Watch the front leg of a horse at trot. The horse's legs at a natural trot will always glide under the horse, creating a diagonal line. Compare this to the Selle Francais, and we see the exact same motion. The leg is being pulled under the horse. Good, well done, perfect. Now let's look at the Irish cob. We see a vertical line, not a diagonal. So what the heck is going on here? The reason for this is most likely they copied the animation of the Selle Francais and simply dropped it on the Irish cob, which is a bit of a problem. Different horse breeds have vastly different movement due to the bone structure. A great example of this is the Arabian skeleton versus the thoroughbred skeleton. When comparing these two, we can clearly see that the Arabian is more upward and the thoroughbred is more downward with a higher crop. Comparing Irish cobs with the Selle Francais, we can see the Irish cob is heavier at the front with a higher crop in comparison to the sport horse. When adding animations to different breeds, these skeletal structures must be considered and how this will affect the horse's animations. This was not done, and as a result we have horses that don't run the way they should. Oh hi Star Stable, what are you doing here? This can also be seen on the position of the bit. The Selle Francais has a longer head than the Irish cob, and they didn't accommodate the tack to the Irish cob's head. But the Irish cob's problems don't stop there. When whistling, they do this sharp turn instead of a wide one like the Selle Francais does. The tack also doesn't fit well, and the tails are spastic to say the least. This is downright atrocious. This is extra DLC content. This is something they ask extra for, and it looks like something a high schooler can make in a day. Another rushed and botched job, and this time they really have absolutely no damned excuse. They made the Selle Francais pretty damn good, and this was something they decided to add as an extra. So saying, oh, but time is unacceptable. They didn't have to add this DLC. They could have rather spent the time polishing the rest of the game. Overall, the animations are a mixed bag, but let's rather get into the personalities, where it's at least somewhat original. Horses have stats, traits that include likes and dislikes, fears, and then they have conditions. Let's start with the stats. Stats are broken up into 6 parts and go from 1 to 10. Endurance is stamina capacity and recharge rate. Agility is speed and taking turns. Strength is running, stopping and jumping. Charisma, how much fame you get from races. Luck lets you find more resources. Specific conditions like hunger will affect the stats and will make strength, for example, drop down if the horse is too hungry. Charisma will be affected by how dirty the horse is, and so on. Meaning the horse is actually affected by these conditions, which is pretty cool. I will say there is a lot of conditions and traits, and although they are simple, it can make for a variety of horses. But then we have traits, which is really awesome. If a horse likes water, for example, it will run faster than normal, and if it doesn't, it will run slower. Horses can also, for example, like jumping or like sprinting, or they can be clingy, causing them to follow you around, or they might have the wander trait, making them wander around the area. I honestly did like all of this and makes the horses feel a bit more alive. If a horse is afraid of the dark and you ride into a dark cave, the horse will become stressed and will need to be petted to be calmed down. If you leave it too long, the horse will freak out and start screaming like a cheerleader who has just lost their chad. Overall, this is actually something interesting and adds a flair of life to the horses that is not often seen. Now, what is pretty cool in Horse Tales is the fixable traits. You can, with a little patience, help the horse overcome its negative traits. So, if a horse is afraid of the dark, running it around in a dark area will help it overcome that fear, and it won't be as afraid anymore, as long as you pet it to calm it down. Unfortunately, due to bugs, this doesn't work. The permanent negative trait has been reported numerous times, and some players say that if you're not damn fast on the trigger to pet the horse won't lose the trait. The fear of the dark trait has created a lot of problems, with people reporting that when they are in caves and petting the horse, it won't respond and will remain terrified, forcing them to launch themselves back to the estate. Now, this situation has apparently been fixed with the newest update. I do hope it works. But even if these bugs weren't there, the traits are not exactly very well executed. Let's take the example of Lazy Jumper. Lazy Jumper means the horse won't jump high. To fix this, you need to jump. You'd think specifically over jumps, but no, all you gotta do is span jump and the horse is cured. Like I said, good idea, but badly implemented. But the main issue with these negative traits is how annoying they can get. Every time your horse gets stressed or freaks out, you have to physically climb off the horse and pet it. You cannot pet it from its back, which is so strange and bothersome and annoying. I really don't want to go through this process every time my horse gets Vietnam flashbacks. Furthermore, this element was bugged from day one. Horses would get stuck in the stressed state. This could be because people didn't know how to calm the horse down as well, but I certainly had this bug, and I was desperately looking for a glue factory at that point. I'm not. No, we're walking. Screw you. I'm walking. No, I'm not gonna get off and do the fucking petting minigame again. I'm sick and tired of it. But there is one more cool concept. The world has an effect on the horse. When it runs through sand, it will slow down as well as running through water. My only problem with this is I don't actually feel much of a difference. Maybe if I test it via a timer, but overall the difference is so negligible as to not even exist. But it's still a nice idea. However, I do feel that the traits are clashing with the world effects. A horse should run slower in sand, which makes sense. Trying running full speed on sand and see how far you get. But at the same time, if a horse has a sand lover trait, it will run faster on sand. I'd rather wish that the effect of the sand was constant. That way it would have been an obstacle to overcome during races. Because the sand lover trait cancels it out, it becomes kinda moot. In closing, personalities are interesting and it's certainly cute, but I don't feel like Horsetails was the first game to do this properly. Equestrian the game and Rain Ravine both have personality traits. Equestrian the game has modifiers, which supposedly affect the horse in a certain way. It's not always clear, but the spooking is certainly something that has been done before. Rain Ravine, in turn, made horses that are either fearful or bold, once again adding personalities affected the game to the genre, and some of the horses have certain obstacles that they don't like to jump over. But the best example would be Sims 3, probably one of the most in-depth horse simulators we currently have on the market. Each horse has a personality, and that personality is expressed through animations and behavior. But it doesn't stop there. We also have Ride, which have courageous and cowardly horses that will speed up or slow down depending on the jump, much like Rain Ravine. Finally, we have my favorite, G1 Jockey, which is an all-time favorite game of mine, and this game needs an extensive guide on the different attributes horses have and how that affects each race. You literally have hundreds, if not thousands of combinations of personalities in that game, and each personality trait affects the gameplay directly. For Horsetails, it's a good start. The personalities are a mixed bag of old and new. It didn't exactly raise the bar, but it did explore these elements a bit differently and made it fresh. Now let's get into the carrying system, my absolute favorite part of horse games.
You sense the sarcasm there, because I meant it.
Why in God's green earth do horse games still make these minigames? This has been a staple of horse game for years. Clean each individual hoof, brush the horse, bathe the horse, then wipe the horse clean, massage the horse, then muck the stall. I get it, you want to make the game into a simulator, but don't let realism outweigh fun. Star Stable got it right, Red Dead Redemption 2 got it right. Just make it a quick activity and let us move on. In Horsetails, parts are okay and others not so much, but they're all minigames which just ticks me off beyond belief. Carrying is split into 4 parts: grooming, bathing, petting and feeding. Feeding is done by selecting a treat and giving it to the horse. The horse have likes or dislikes like Alicia Online, but it is absolutely atrociously done. Let me explain Alicia Online first. The way Alicia Online communicated the likes and dislikes to the players was through a visual reaction from the horse. It would pin its ears back and look away if it didn't like the food offered, and would rear and whinny when it liked it. You could force a horse to eat food it didn't like, but all that happened is the care meter didn't go up as high, and sometimes the horse would just refuse to eat. Very eloquent. Have a Jorvik shilling, Alicia Online. You've earned it. Horsetails needs to punish you, because it's unforgiving like that. They decided the best way to help you know what a horse like is through trial and error. Horses freak out over carrots and apples for some damn reason, and they will become stressed if you give them the wrong food, like they have some god-awful allergy to it. And giving sugar cubes and peppermints, although it usually is less of a problem, from what I could tell, you really don't want to waste them because they're going to be used for breeding and they're hard to come by. It's just so badly done. Now, the horses does have notes section where you can write down a few things like the way it likes being petted or its favorite food. But the fact that you have to waste food before you can find out what it likes is so counterintuitive. Just make the horse pin its ears back if it doesn't like it. Give me a visual cue. Alicia Online got this right almost 10 years ago. Petting the horse is required to lower the stress meter. It's a mini game that fades out and then fades back in every time we want to pet a horse. We're off to a great start. When a horse is stressed, it won't gallop, and when a horse is really stressed, it will remain stuck in a trot and will make me scream like a cheerleader who has lost her Chad. To activate it, simply stand next to the horse and hit the button. During the minigame, you will have to click 3 to 4 keys to pet the horse, WASD, if you're playing on PC. Each of these will have a different reaction depending on the position of the key. So ASD will work fine on horse A, but will make horse B bite your face off. Pro tip, never start with W. It's fine on paper and does encourage that cute factor so many horse games go for, especially when you get it perfectly. But the problem is when you keep getting them wrong, you can't change your input. Once you've made a decision, you're locked in there like a nuke, and every time you get the petting sequence wrong, the horse's stress meters fall and you need to repeat it more and more to get the meter back up again. It's very unforgiving, but that's really the best summary for this game. Horsetails the Unforgiving. The permanent stress bug didn't help matters either, causing people great frustration. I had to get off my horse 3 to 4 times in the span of a few minutes because it just kept freaking out. This bug, I believe, was the cause of many a player quitting, but I do think it has been removed now. Also, you can't pet the horse while riding. When it gets stressed, you have to stop the horse, get off, click pet, fade to black, do the petting, however many amount of times you have to, leave petting screen, get back on the horse and continue. Someone shoot me. Ow! The grooming is really just do the prompts on screen. It doesn't take long, but like with most of these minigames, it starts to feel like a chore pretty damn quickly, so I stopped doing it very quickly. Oh, and it doesn't clean the horse. No idea why, but the only way to clean your horse is through bathing. Logic, cleaning horse does not clean horse. What is interesting is for a split second, the horse is actually clean. See, it flashes clean and then it goes dirty again. Oh, that's just absolutely frickin' brilliant. I don't know if this is a bug or intentional, but it's a damn tease. Bathing is used to clean the horse. Go figure. You use the hose to spray the water into the little bubbles. Literally just use the long spray and hit the bubbles. This one is less annoying, but most likely because I can actually see a difference in my horse after I've done the minigame, and it gives me a sense of satisfaction. What is interesting about the grooming and bathing is there's no endpoint. So you can literally spray your horse indefinitely, long after it's clean. And I wonder why they left it like that. Just another sign of how rushed the production was, most likely. Oh, you can also bathe the horse in nearby pools, which is a nice touch. When it works. Which it doesn't always. Now, comparing these minigames to other horse games, it's pretty much the same. It goes a little faster, but the punishment of the feeding and petting drops it down hard. Why punish me for something I can't guess? And horses aren't this finicky about being scratched or fed. It sure as heck doesn't raise the bar, so it's just there. Only 5.8% of players bothered to discover and race all 8 races on Steam. This should once again tell you everything you need to know about racing. Now, racing is actually a decent activity and at the same time a big letdown with only 8 races to compete in. For interest's sake, my riding stable's Life with Horses has 9 tracks, and that game came out in 2008. And yes, it has a castle race as well. The point of racing is to win and get fame to expand your estate. Why fame is not a currency in this game, I honestly have no goddamn idea. Racing is simple. You run around the track, jump and duck as needed, grab coins and horseshoes, and the more you collect, the better your total score and the more fame you will accumulate. Your horse's cleanliness will also determine the end fame score. Dirty, dirty horses don't fill up the bank. There are no other horses you ride against, only the ghost of the rider to beat, and this gives you a good indication on whether you're winning. I like this feature and it's always nice to have one in racing games. Now, when the horses are not being finicky and you're not missing any jumps, the racing can be downright fun. There is a sort of satisfaction racing into these yellow circles, picking up horseshoes, while watching the ghost of your opponent pass you by again. I hate you. But there are some problems, because of course there is. Let's start at the start, and I'm about to lose my shit. Who in their right minds put a false start function in a racing game? This is probably one of the dumbest ideas I've ever seen. It's not engaging or interesting. It's annoying. You keep hitting the button too quickly because you want to get a quick start, and the game keeps telling you false start, and so you have to restart the race over and over and over and over and over again for no other reason than the game getting the chance to point and laugh at you. Games from 30 years ago understood that you need to lock the player in place to prevent exactly this from happening. It is just another punishment, and this game loves to punish you. It's like a teacher or a mom standing next to you with a ruler and whacking you over the knuckles every time you do something wrong. It is... I hate this. Then we have the jumping problems. I'm going to sum the entire experience up with one clip. Abandoning the race. Abandon. I don't know why I still keep playing this game, honest to God. This is just awful. I'm done. Bye. This jumping has seen the near rage quit of many a player, myself included, and for a damn good reason. It's downright punishing and unforgiving again. The player needs to hit the button before the jump to clear it. You can also hold it in to lengthen the jump. Problem is, if you're sometimes even a little off, you instantly fail and the game punishes you by teleporting you back 20 to 30 paces, sometimes even more. What great game design! It's frustrating, especially when you keep missing it by half an inch, or worse when the horse becomes stressed and loses the ability to gallop, making the jump even more difficult. There is a lot of ways you could do this without whacking the player on the nose every time. Heck, they actually have a different punishment system already in game. When you jump over a pole and miss it, the game will simply knock the pole and make the horse stumble. Why not make this the same for all jumps? It would speed up the riding and will avoid very frustrating gameplay situations. But nah, we want to punish our players, that's fun. You can also duck during races and watch your player turn into Flappy Bird, and you can also drift. Whee! Also, if you're thinking about doing a bunch of races one right after the other, think again. The only way to get to these races is to physically ride to them. That means traversing the world over and over again. There are no waypoints. What great game design! Although My Riding Stables 2 also had this feature, what it did not have was a world this big, confusing, corridorish, and with a broken map. I once again have to ask, what were the developers thinking? Right, so as I was working on this video, I came across a very interesting problem. I wanted to get to the St. Elias village up there, and the only way to do that was to kind of cut across a different section of the map. I kind of went around, essentially, around the bend through that forested area, as you can see there. I followed that road, I came up there, and then I reached that point over there, as you can see. When I reached that point, this is what I found. I can't get up here. There's no way to build a bridge. There's no way to get over here. It is literally just a dead end. So now I have to go all the way around again. I have to reset to the estate and go the other way around because I took the wrong road. Because the map wasn't clear that was essentially a dead end. It's stuff like this that makes this game almost impossible to enjoy. Like, why do this? But now we have to get to the sneaky way race situation, because that was fun. When the game was launched, the players got well and truly stuck on the Lily race. No matter what people did or tried, they could not progress. Horses were permanently stressed, causing them to stop galloping, and in turn making the race impossible to finish. I personally went and tamed 3 new horses before finding one that worked, and after watching a guide, I finally got it. But for others, it didn't end there. It turns out that even if you won, the game was so broken it couldn't even register that you should be continuing the story. This is where a lot of people got stuck and where a lot of us lost interest in this game. If the game had been a true sandbox, then this wouldn't have mattered. But the story gatekeeps the world, so you literally couldn't get to those features they so love to brag about. Now, this race wasn't a single issue, but rather a culmination of a bunch. I'm showing in the background my numerous attempts to win the race. My fury knew no bounds during this run, and I do not blame people for calling this game broken on this experience alone. Even on my second playthrough, I'm still having problems with this race. It's fine to have launch day problems, but the sheer amount of bugs, glitches, and issues this game came with is downright shameful, and having players get stuck here for so long, that is just unacceptable. Construction in this game is shallow and pointless. Okay, let me try and be fair here. On your estate, you can build stable, different types of crops, playpen, paddock, riding arena, breeding stables, wash station, styling station, and a house, and bridges. And each of these buildings have a sort of function. In order to keep your horses, you will need 3 to 4 structures. Crops to feed the horses, a playpen and a paddock to keep them mentally stable, and a stable so that you can own more horses. There is a small, medium, and big stable. Medium stable unlocks the option to change your tack. You can also change the house from a camping site to a medium house to a mansion. The clothing option is only unlocked when you build the medium-sized house. The wash station, you can wash your horse. The styling station, you can style your horse's mane and tail. And you can also build a big arena. The only way to build is to get resources, but we've mostly covered resources and inspiration, so I won't repeat it here. Now, overall, the construction goes slick and quick. There are, of course, some bugs. A bug that cropped up was the disappearing of buildings and decorations. People would lose entire structures when they return to the game. Esser has patched this, hopefully, so I'm hoping this bug won't persist. But the real issue is how empty these buildings feel and a little pointless. I can't see my horse in the stable, and I can't see it in the paddock or the playpen. You don't have to use the grooming station because you really don't need the extra frame from racers, and you can't even see the horse's mane being tangled. You don't have to use the cleaning station because you can wash your horse in a lake. You have a huge paddock where you can ride a horse, and it's absolutely unnecessary because you can train your horse to jump by spamming space. And the only three items that really do matter are the styling station, breeding station, and the crops, which directly relate to the breeding station. The house and the median stable also open up the features to chain clones, which should have been available from the get-go, and feels like they did so just to ensure these buildings served a purpose beyond just being a box to keep horses in and just being a place to sleep. This instantly makes me think again of my riding stable's life with horses. Although the buildings did not have such a wide range and you couldn't, for example, decorate your estate and build a big arena, but each and every building had added to the gameplay. A massage station helped to relieve the stress of horses. Expanding a stable meant I could keep more horses and I could see them all. A guest house brought in guests and money, showing people actually walking around and taking your horses out for a ride. Well thought out gameplay mechanics and features that interlock. It all felt a lot more alive than Horse Tales, and this game is years old. They also didn't need a big budget to understand that how features interact between each other and add to the gameplay is much more important than just the quantity of features being added. And then we have extra parts of the estate that are littered all across the map, and I feel a part of my soul just die. These patches of extra land where you can build more stables to house more horses you can't see were solely added to give you a reason to travel. I get it, yippee-ki-yay, we have a reason to ride around, but that doesn't mean it actually makes sense. Why are these plots of land here? They feel slapped into the game with no rhyme or reason just to add something more to the game. Finally, and this is mind-boggling really, why on God's green earth do I not need to hold down a button to build? I have to hold it down for petting, mounting, talking, feeding, washing, or even in picking a goddamn flower. But the one time where I can actually lose resources, I don't need to hold down a button.
What idiot designed this thing?
You did, sir.
Fair enough. Wilson, fire somebody!
Yes, sir, Mr. President.
The other big feature often mentioned is breeding. In total, only 4.4% of people bothered to breed more than 20 horses on Steam, and there's a good reason for that. It's complicated, it's too much of a hassle, and it's not exactly explained well. Let's start with the complicated part, which is one of the most bizarre additions to a kids game I've seen in a while. Keep in mind, this game is filled up with little hearts, little cuddles, and cute little factors. And then you get to the breeding section, and all of that goes out the window. The game works on genotypes and phenotypes. It takes the time to mention these, but doesn't bother to explain them properly, which is most likely where a lot of frustration is stemming from. So I'm going to be doing due diligence, and with the help of an amazing user who wrote a thesis on this shit, I'll be doing Horse Tales' job and explaining the genotypes and phenotypes as best I can, because I don't understand this either. In very brief, the genotype tells you about which version of a gene, called alleles, are present in your horse's genome, or its DNA, and a phenotype tells you about what observable traits, or in our case what color, is present in your horse. In very layman's terms, genotype is the data, phenotype is how the data will be visually translated. That's the way I'm explaining it to myself, and that's the way it's going to stay. So let's take the example of a black horse and a chestnut horse. A black horse will have the dominant version of the gene E, which creates a black pigment, while a chestnut will have only the recessive or subordinate non-dominant version of E, which creates a yellow-red pigment. A bay horse has the dominant version of yet another gene, A, present on top of the dominant E gene that makes the black pigment, and this gets very complicated, so let's rather look at a chart to help us out here. Oh god, someone help. It's not a bad idea really to bring in complicated concepts into a horse game, that's all well and good, and will cater to an older audience, but this ain't the way to go about it. This part of the game is not explained well at all. They essentially expect you to figure it out by yourself, and I have no idea where to even begin. I'm not a color geneticist, I'm a horse gamer, sometimes a marshmallow mascot, but I'm wholly underqualified to even know where to begin. And can you imagine what kids will feel like? No wonder only 4.4% of people bothered to breed more than 20 horses. Horse Tales made the decision to add color genetics, but they didn't make the decision to explain it properly, to take the time and help players understand what all of these letters and strings mean. Now, we can certainly go on the internet and go look for a guide on how it works, but the game decided to add this, and it's the game's responsibility to help us understand it. If you want to add complicated ideas, you need to ensure that it will be translated in a way that that the layman will understand, otherwise only 4.4% of people will bother doing it. Let's take a look at Rival Stars to kind of emphasize my point here. In Rival Stars, there are no strings of genetic codes, and breeding, although not very realistic, makes perfect sense. It is simple and user-friendly and is still what we consider basically realistic. It's the age-old battle of realism versus fun, and although I don't mind a good bit of realism in a game where cutesy hearts are all over the place, the sudden adding of a genotype and phenotype is downright jarring. Overall though, the genetics in this game is actually pretty realistic, according to our local horse color geneticists. Thanks for helping out. Some colors are missing, which does throw the breeding a little out of whack sometimes, and sometimes you get completely different horses than you should have, and the colors don't always show up the way they should, but with the bugs being worked on, the genetics in Horsetails is quite solid, and does make sense to a person who understands horse genetics again. Now I guess the idea is for you to keep breeding and slowly learn how these genetics work, but you can't even spam breeding because 1, it takes a whole in-game day for a horse to be born. Yes, I said horse, not foal. You get full-sized horses again, poor mare. And secondly, you have to grind for resources. Again. I need 5 apples, 12 sunflowers, and 12 carrots. And I am not going to run around looking for those resources. This game can shoot itself in the face. When putting 2 good horses together, you will need to find their favorite feed, peppermints being usually one of them. Where you can grow most of the crops on your farm, excluding sugar cubes, peppermints can only be found after you build a sandcastle and tell this little girl you've done so. You get 5 peppermints per sandcastle, and you will sometimes need up to 30 peppermints to breed once. And that's about the point where I gave up, and I believe most others did as well, although thank God for this bug. You can also either breed at a breeding stable in the world or at a breeding station you can build. The breeding stables are a bit of a waste, it's too far, and really the better option is just to build a breeding stable and have at it because you're going to have much better horses. The breeding stables in the world do not have good horses. But then again, I only got the blueprint for the breeding stable after the game was basically done, as I didn't know I had to finish a side quest to get important blueprints. Oh, this game. The breeding section is an awful mixed bag of interesting, overcomplicated and grindy. It doesn't add anything new because Horse Reality and Rival Stars both have these intricate breeding ideas, and both of those offer good guides and are much easier to understand. The breeding is interesting at best if you're a color geneticist, and a chore at worst if you really just want to have pretty horses. And that's the end of the review. Now we can finally buckle down and ask the question, what the hell happened to Horsetails? Because clearly something happened. I believe what happened with this game is a mixture of biting off more than they could chew and some over-the-top advertising. Before the game had ever seen launch, Alice Rupert from the Main Quest blog had been brought on board to help to get the game up to a standard that horse gamers would more likely appreciate. With the sheer amount of bad horse games on the market, and Rupert being a strong voice in the community for what a good horse game should be, this in of itself made a lot of people sit up and pay attention. But then she went and did a few interviews and made some interesting statements. I'm convinced this is the best game this market has seen in a lifetime. We're significantly raising the bar for what the genre can be, and I hope the rest of the industry catches up. Although she does make a point of trying to downplay the game somewhat during the article, she unfortunately made an even bigger deal out of it when she called herself the authority on horse games. And although you can call yourself anything you want, this only boosted expectation further from people who might not have known her. Using her blog, she further promoted the game, and long-time fans for her blog would only become more and more hyped, causing people to become a little overzealous for the game. There is a very old saying, put too much weight on a young colt's back and you will break it. The reason it will break is simple. The horse is not yet ready to carry that much weight, which is exactly what happened to Horsetails. Too much expectation was placed upon its back, and when that weight bear down on it, the game, in such a young state, basically early access, crumbled under the weight of that expectation. Which is a shame, as the game really does have a lot of potential when you scrape away all the bugs and add a lot of more features. But to be fair, was it really the hype that hurt it so much? Could expectation really hurt a game to this extent? We've taken the time throughout this video to look at this game, see how broken it is, how many issues cropped up from launch, how empty it is, how shallow the gameplay is, and how little effort was put in to polish it. Personally, I believe even without the hype, the game would have taken a nosedive, and an even harder one if people didn't support the main quest so vehemently. It's just not a good game. It's broken and empty, as I said, and the reason for that, I believe, is due to poor development and planning. This game received a budget of 620,000 euros, and that is nothing to sneeze at, with a 3-year time span to develop it. Now, for AAA titles, that certainly is not a huge amount, but for an indie game, yeah, that's definitely within a reasonable time frame and budget to make a good game. So really, I think what happened is that they just aimed too high. A surprisingly common problem for indie developers and even AAA developers. We get excited, ambitious, and suddenly we want to throw in everything in the kitchen sink because we want the game to not only be the best it can be, but to also at no point disappoint the gamers. But the thing is, what gamers want is just a game that works and that is fun to play. Whether you're making the next big horse game or just a small indie game with cute little dolphins, it doesn't matter. What matters is that the intrigue, engagement, and fun factor are all there front and center, and that it is functional. You don't need everything. You just need everything that you have to function properly. And if that means cutting out some features, that won't matter. Because most gamers, horse gamers included, we really don't mind as long as the product works. We just want a fun game. As one of the developers from Horse Tales once said, on a different matter, but it certainly applies here. This is not a case of horse game fans are hard to please. This is a case of tiny dev team bit of more than they could chew. And doesn't that just fit in well here? So after all of this, what is my honest opinion on Horse Tales? It is a game that has potential, but that fell short of the mark due to overambition and a need to stand out from the crowd. Instead of making a good small game, they ended up making a big bad one. And to be frank, I'll take good small any day of the week.